Welcome back to the channel and another video on the Mk5. In the last video you saw we put the Mk6 front end on, so I kind of feel like we should be calling it a Mk5.5 or a Mk 5.6 maybe. It's got kind of a ring to it. So let's take a look at what we've got to do to get all of this lined up properly like I spoke about at the end of the last video. Let's get to work. So at the end of the last video we showed you how it doesn't really line up along the door here when you just bolt a Mk6 wing onto a Mk5. The main issue being that the shape of the door is completely different. You can see it's got this harsh swage line in, whereas the Mk5 door is just a smooth curve coming down. There's also quite a bit of difference in shape down the bottom here. They're sort of completely opposing angles. One's got a bend on the Mk6 which is going in at the bottom, and the Mk5 one is bending out at the bottom. So our solution to this is a brand new Mk5 wing, which we're going to cut a section out of the Mk6 one, section out of the Mk5 wing, and weld them together so that everything lines up properly. So let me mark out where we are going to do the cut and explain why we are going to do it in this location. Right, this is something like what we're going to go for. Looks a little bit over the top, but it's going to be the best way to do it. So most people say, why don't you just chop straight down the middle there, shortest weld, and Bob's your uncle, all done. Well, the issue is on the Mk6, this flat area before the arch swage, it's 50mm deep, and on the Mk5 it's 30mm. So you've got a 15mm difference that you are just not going to be able to make look good at all. So the way we're doing it is keeping the whole front section of the Mk6, keeping the whole of the arch shape. I'm going to try and keep the cuts as straight as possible just to make it easier to cut both sections and be able to weld them up. And then the Mk5 piece will be up here, which will get rid of this swage. It'll also line up down with the door and then come all the way across, so the whole bottom of the section is Mk5, because then it'll all line up perfectly with the bottom of the door here. So we'll just tweak this and then we can start making our first cuts. So the first job will be to make all of these cuts, get this section off, and then bolt the Mk5 one on and do the opposite to it, and hopefully they'll marry up. And that's the Mk6 wing chopped. So this is the section that we're going to be keeping. I left the whole inner frame on just because I think it'd be a nicer way of doing it, being able to just spot weld onto the little tab there rather than having to join in behind there as well. So we've now got to do the same to the Mk5, but keeping this section. So I've got the Mk5 wing bolted on. You can see it all lines much better with that door. So this is where we're going to end up with everything lining up properly. There is a little bit of damage on the bottom of this wing typically, so we'll just have to sort that out when we do everything, but obviously there's cutting and welding that's got to be done anyway. You can see here another reason why you can't just do a straight chop down the middle is the Mk5 wings are actually a different shape at the top. You can see that's the Mk6 bonnet here, and the Mk5 wing is sort of a more flatter, straighter line, whereas the Mk6 has got a curve in, which obviously the wing is the same. So if you were to do a chop in the middle, you'd end up with a mismatch in height here. So this way is the way to go, and it should look all good when it's done. So I marked on the bonnet here where we did the cut on the Mk6 wings. So this is my starting point. What I'm going to do to begin with is just do a straight chop down here and then see whether the Mk6 section will bolt on the front and overlap the back half of the Mk5, and then I can scribe down the shape so that I get a nice perfect cut line. So hopefully that works. If not, I'm going to have to make a template to be able to transfer that shape onto this wing. You can see that that has worked lovely. So this is how it's all gonna fit together. So it all lines up nicely at the front and the back now. And then all of this, even just with that first rough cut, is sitting very nicely. At the moment, obviously it's not perfect because this one at the top here is just sat on top of the Mk5 section. So we can start trimming it down, cutting along this line on the Mk5 wing. So as this pushes all over, the arch does line up there, you can see. So we can get all of that in, get it all fitting nicely. We'll trial all of the lights and bumper and everything back on just to make sure that everything is in the right place before doing all of the final cutting and tweaking of all of that. But that is going to work very nicely. So let's start cracking in and getting these ready to weld up. There you go, there's the headlight and bumper bolted back on. You can see that everything lines up perfectly as it should. We've got the gap down the bonnet. Just lightly clamped it together down the bottom here. Took a little of the excess off, as you would have seen, so it was able to sit better. But everything is fitting perfect. I'm well happy with that. So you can see how that is all coming together now. What we got to do now is just tidy up where these join, and we can start getting it welded up.
There's the two sections of the wings all clamped in place and as it should be. So it's now got all the right swages and curves exactly where they want to be. You can see we've got rid of the one up the top here, kept the arch shape, everything lines up with the bonnet, everything lines up with the door, there's no nasty gaps. So this was the best way to do it. You can see the shape flows perfectly between the two sections, so that's going to be really nice to weld together. Should hopefully be a nice straightforward job. The only bit that we might have to address is just down the bottom here where this section of the new Mk5 wing was bent. Once I've got all of this welded up, we'll have a look at this and see exactly what can be done with that, and if it's just too bent out of shape or it's going to be too much work, then I'll just probably chop along here and weld in the original section of the original Mk5 wing, which will be correct. I can just clean all of that up and everything will be as it should be. So we'll get all of this unbolted,
just final tidy up all of these joins, make sure all of the gaps are even, nicely perfect, everything lines up. There's no pulling on the panels where the two meet, so it's going to distort, and we'll get it all back together and start welding it up. And that's the two sections of the wing bolted back on for the final time before we get it welded up. So you saw me cleaning up these bits and the inside ready to weld up. So just off camera, I just made sure all of these were ground down nicely, so all lined up. So you can see down the bottom here, all of the shape of the arch is all correct. All of the gapping is nice, going all the way up. These clamps are perfect for this job. You've got a little piece that slips in behind, and then when you tighten it up it pulls the two bits together. I could do with some more of them really. I've just got the 4, so I'm gonna have to move them along or weld sections up at a time. You can see just this bit here still just needs holding there, but absolutely nothing is under tension, so it's not gonna pull once we release it all. Everything flows perfectly. When you run your hand over it all, the shape is exactly as it should. So if it welds in nicely, it's not going to take much tidying up. I used my Metabo cordless grinder to do all of these bits, which was ideal for it. Nice and light and easy to use. Just cleaned it up really good. So now I can start tacking it together. So I'm going to do sections at a time, not sure whether I'm going to start from the top or down the bottom. So I'll have to move some of these clamps. Just wanted to obviously make sure that it was all lining up properly. And we'll get welding.